Well, Charles, Joe Biden is presiding over a Schmuck dynasty.
I don't even think he's qualified to be a full schmuck. I mean, this guy is a disaster.
Total disaster.
He is a total epic disaster, especially when you consider the way in which he was rammed down everybody's throats. The idea was that the clown car that was the Democratic primary process in 2020 was filled with so many egregiously bad clowns that the Democrat elders said, we need somebody who's competent and somebody who's experienced and somebody who's worldly wise and somebody who's was intimately involved with one of the most scandal-free administrations ever. That's why we'll get this guy, Joe Biden.
I was going to say that person wasn't available, so they took Joe.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've had a chance now to watch the Joe Biden speech.
I did.
But to me, he came across, and I don't know if you've ever had to deal with people like this, who are caught dead to rights. And,
I have.
Yeah, exactly. They're caught dead to rights, and you've got them dead to rights, but they're the boss, or they're the whatever, and they have to speak to an audience and explain their position. And what they do is they pull out, I'm going to get madder and talk louder and louder, and I'm the boss, and you're not the boss, and you better watch out what I'm going to do to you if you piss me off any further. That is the opposite of a Republican government or a republic, which in theory we have, or democracy in action where your vote counts. So we didn't elect a moron to hide out in his basement and peremptorily say, I'm just going to leave Afghanistan. I mean, it's not that he just did that to the American voters. I mean, I think the worst thing of all this is what he has done to our in quotes, allies. Yeah. I mean, there were British men and women in Afghanistan, and they were there partially under the protection of their troops, but they were there secure in the knowledge they thought that America had more skin in the game than they did. And there were other nations that sent their brave fighters, men and women, into Afghanistan. And apparently on the way out the door, it's like, well, I'm not going to tell you. You might get upset. I'm just going to leave. It's just, I know I went to business school. I suppose I have the credential to say I'm a manager. I don't particularly, I've been so disappointed with people. I don't like to manage people because they constantly screw up. But this doofus has taken us to a new zone we're going to discuss with the in a place where we can discuss it more openly.
The First Amendment Forum.
Yeah, he's taken us to a place here where only somebody dumber than he would dare to stand up and defend this behavior. I mean, this is an epic fail. This is, I would argue, treason. It is certainly grounds for our allies to ask us for monetary retribution or whatever damages.
Honestly, I mean, it could be grounds for the UN to say, hey, this guy's dangerous and he represents a threat to, like if North Korea started launching nuclear missiles, right, the UN would get together and say, hey, that's a bad guy, we have to do something. How do we know they won't do that to President dumb Joe Biden? Yeah,
and again, we talk about this all the time, that one of the ways that you can think clearly about value of assets and liabilities is you contrast different things that are supposed to be the same, the same sorts of common stock. You say, well, this one's overpriced, highly priced, and this one's lower priced. This one is highly priced and has shit growth prospects. This is low priced and has great growth. You begin to see anomalies here. And here we have a doofus blabbering through a demented, insane speech where he refuses to take questions on surrounding the most consequential decision by an American president in war in
maybe
ever, but certainly in the 21st century. I mean, he decided, because he has all these great military credentials, to run out of Afghanistan, leaving behind, by the way, the translator who saved his fucking butt in 2008. I don't know if you know about this story. Where
saved his son or something?
No, Kerry and Biden and some other and Chuck Hagel were in a helicopter in Afghanistan when a heavy snow blizzard hit. And they couldn't stay in the air, so they had to come down. And this translator went all the way up to help get him out of the mess and manage the local people, whatever. That guy's stuck behind enemy lines now. And
wow.
You know, I mean, it's just that shows you the way in which this doofus will treat you. But what I was going to say is, here you have the guy who, at the time he's presiding over the epic failures to withdraw from Afghanistan sensibly. That very moment, his administration is banning the importation of Russian ammunition.
To where?
People use Russian ammunition in their American guns and other guns. And so he's trying to gut the Second Amendment inside this country by various devious means that he knows will never get approved in Congress or through the Supreme Court. So he's trying executive orders or regulatory moves, et cetera, at the same time that he has turned over to a terrorist group a cache of weapons. We could debate their value, the book value.
I think those weapons were bought on credit, but it is a cache of weapons.
That's right. It's 82 billion people are throwing around, and of course, PolitiFact is saying no, it's not 82 billion. But
what
whatever,
was it, 81 billion?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's 81,963. Douche.
Oh.
You know, whatever.
Even if it's 6 billion, if they left 100 guns there, I mean, maybe 100 would be an oversight, but how could they leave? We've seen now allegations that the Taliban were flying around helicopters hanging a guy. That didn't seem too credible to me. But now today they say the Taliban is upset that the helicopters don't work.
Well, but stay on the 83 billion for a second. Japan, which has the second largest real economy after the United States. The Chinese numbers are crap and bullshit and inventions. The Japanese numbers are also dodgy on the economy, but they're better than the Chinese numbers. The Japanese, because of this messing around, fears over Taiwan, concern about Biden and the direction of the deranged Democratic wing, have decided they're going to increase or saying they're going to increase their annual budget on defense to $50 billion a year. Now, remember that after World War II, we put strict limits on Japan because we feared someday they would become another danger. But if Japan as a country, and that's a real country with over 100 million people in it, I think it's like 130 million or thereabouts. And if they are going to spend 50 billion, what the hell are a bunch of Talibans in a country with, I think it's 32 million people, might be 33. You know, how are they going to keep control over weapons some say might have been worth 83 billion? And doesn't this create a situation where every criminal on the planet is looking at this Eid list or whatever you want to call it, Christmas list or holiday list? This is out there somewhere in Afghanistan to be found. And there are a lot of people who are not going to say, you know what, I better make sure that I register properly with the Taliban before I send my criminal Sinaloa cartel people from Mexico or the people from in Colombia or the Yakuza, you name it, the Russian mafia, there's tons of mafia, the Italian mafia for that matter. They're all going to come streaming in here trying to get these weapons. And meanwhile, so is George Bush's friend Al Qaeda and ISIS and ISIS-K and you name it, all the different...
I feel like the United States has made up some of those names for ISIS and ISIS-K. Like, how do we know? When I spoke with Marzia and said, can you tell? Like, if you asked me, how can you tell if somebody walking down the street is a Hasidic Jew, I could explain that. How can you tell if they're a Rastafarian? I could explain some of the things that might indicate that. I asked her, can you tell ISIS from Taliban?
But can a Rastafarian be a Hasidic Jew?
It's a good question. I'm saying that you can't immediately identify someone as that, but if you were walking down the street and a bunch of guys in furry hats with long beards and payas and black coats came at you, would you think, oh no, that's the Taliban? Or this appears to be a bunch of guys who want me to wrap tefillin. I better go.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that Biden was sold to us as the competent president. You know, after 4 years of mayhem under Trump, now finally we have a competent government that we can rely on. Do you remember all that?
I recall.
This is not remotely competent. First of all, the guy can't fucking show up on time. There are very few things that really piss me off. But if I'm involved in a business transaction with another person and we agree that the meeting is going to start at a certain time, I always get there early to make sure. I've noticed that. Yeah. To make sure that it happens on time. And I really don't appreciate it when somebody says it's going to start at 1:30 as he did for the speech and he comes on at 3:45.
Was that how delayed it was?
Something like that, yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Or 2:45 to 3:45. I forget what it was, but it was a ridiculous amount of time.
And consistently he's late.
And people do this when they're insecure and they're worried about being caught out. They want to let you know, I am not going to wait. You're going to wait because you're less important than I am.
Well, that's what I always felt it was, is that it's somebody being obnoxious, that their time is more important. Right. But now that you mention that, you're right. The people that there's one meeting in particular that I remember being flabbergasted at how late it was. And eventually I did get into business with the person and realized over time that he was absolutely incompetent.
I won't tell you who this is because I don't want to get in too much trouble, but I'll tell the story that I actually once was in a business meeting, expected the business meeting to happen on a certain day. The person was unavailable, unreachable, and showed up at the appointed time 2 days later as if nothing was wrong. And I was like, what fucking planet do you come from? I mean, he can't do this to me.
Now, I forgot to mention something, Charles, because, what we've taken to doing here on Wednesdays, now that we're in a post-constitutional United States, where, unfortunately, this is Donald Trump's fault.
Yeah.
He had an opportunity to preserve the First Amendment, and that could have been done if he took strenuous and unwavering action against Twitter for removing him. He could have said, listen, if you want to run one of these things that's replaced newspapers and telephone and whatever, that's supplanting all these technologies that allow communication, you absolutely cannot favor and have the ability to decide if foreign terror organizations can post pictures of them stealing our helicopters while the President of the United States can't exercise a controversial opinion. He could have taken action against Twitter. He failed to. And now you and I are left with the only option that I can muster, which is to create this First Amendment forum. A lot of people are going to say, oh, you could put it on Rumble, and people can watch the normal Crowdsource the Truth open broadcasts on rumble.com/user/CS the truth. But the problem with doing that is that it really is another unsustainable model that people are asking me to engage in, because I think you would agree with me. Rumble or Odyssey or any of these things, if they get large enough, are very likely to be acquired by, somehow. They're already doing things where they're paying Tulsi Gabbard to produce like the worst looking selfie videos I've ever seen. They're paying her a huge amount of money. Cullen told me they've started doing things with comments. BitChute completely eliminated a channel that I was using to store evidence in one of the lawsuits against me. One of the litigants falsely represented that it was a copyright infringement to show this evidence. So all of these things are susceptible to being taken down. What I'm trying to move towards, Charles, is a platform that, to the greatest extent possible, I control. And we can't have the rules and the judgment of some private company taking it down. I'm going to operate within the context of the law, and it will require the law to take it down. So we should be very safe. And to achieve that, people need to join us on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. The First Amendment Forum will take place on those platforms, and we're going to start in about 15 minutes. And again, we don't discuss things that are against the law. We don't incite people to take any actions that are against the law, but we want to be able to speak about these things that YouTube, I put up a video the other day exploring this controversy surrounding really limited information about the death of Robert David Steele. And I had a nurse who had released like a 2-hour video talking about all of the things that she alleged relative to Elmhurst Hospital. That video has been in place for something like a year. She's got close to 2 million views. She said a fraction of the things that she said in that video, in this video with me on Monday. It was removed, struck from YouTube within hours. Crowdsource the Truth 5 is totally down now for the next week. So people are watching this broadcast on Crowdsource the Truth 6, on the Sunday with Charles YouTube channel, on Rumble, on Odyssey, but we can't be relying on these, big tech platforms and these medium tech platforms that are moving towards big tech. We need people to become viewer sponsors of the show, and we'll carry on in that way. But there's a lot to discuss today.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just quickly, with regard to Robert David Steele, right before the broadcast, I did speak to the CEO of cremationwithcare.com, which is a service that will connect people with different funeral service companies around the nation. They're just sort of a network that connects you to places to get cremated, and the CEO of the place did confirm that Robert David Steele was cremated by one of their associates, and so he is dead. The reason I was scrutinizing it so heavily is that, listen, he's a liar. He's lied about many, many things. He's publicly said he was involved in creating false flags for the CIA. In my case, where he sued me, Steele v. Goodman, discovery revealed that he created his own nomination, or the documents that were involved in his nomination for the Nobel Prize. So this is a guy that's regularly involved with hoaxes. And in the absence of evidence, I wanted to scrutinize that very heavily. That's my approach. I'd rather be telling the story 2, 3, 4 days later more accurately than be the first one out with a story and say, well, what evidence do you have? And have the answer be none. It's also worth mentioning, if he is dead, well, he's now presumed dead. He's dead. That seems to have an impact on the ongoing litigation in Steele v. Goodman. His lawyer hasn't returned my messages for 4 days. Yesterday, his voicemail was full. This morning, the phone was back to accepting voicemails. So I think his lawyer is still alive, but he's not responding to the question, is your client dead or alive, and will you now withdraw this case? So we'll see where that goes.
That's good to know. Good to know. But great poster by the art department. I think that, when Joe Biden said months back that Hunter Biden is the smartest person he knows, at first I was like, that can't be possible.
Look at the wife, though.
And then I said, yeah. But then I said to myself, yeah, he probably is the smartest person
that Joe knows.
That Joe Biden knows, exactly.
We can't even keep track of who he knows and doesn't know. People might be wondering why we've chosen to include Bill and Hillary Clinton here and not B-Rock and Michelle Obama. I did that, well, first of all, because they matched the look of the couple quite a bit better. But also, I mean, this is totally Benghazi diplomacy, what's going on here. Wreck the place and then talk about what a great success it was.
Well, also, I think there are parallels with Louisiana, what's going on now with Hurricane Ida in Louisiana. We're in a desperate place. And the last time we were in a desperate place in Louisiana was when Bill and George H.W. Bush tried to, quote, rescue Louisiana and surrounding states with the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Foundation, which is a complete fraud. And we have been through that in some depth, but I'm going to go through it in even more depth in the stuff I've been writing. So what comes around goes around. Here we are again in 2021. I guess it's 16 years almost to the day that the tragedy last struck in New Orleans. We have a similar situation, actually, New Orleans and Afghanistan. In New Orleans back in 2005, Bill actually and Hillary were taking shots at the Bush administration. Why isn't George Bush going down there? Where are all the policemen? Where are all the firemen? Yada, yada, yada. And the mayor was saying the same thing. It's a disgrace that the police are hiding and the fire people aren't out helping residents of New Orleans. So what turned out to be the case is that there was, let's say, a payroll of 75,000 people for both combined. And in reality, there were only 25,000 working. And the other 50,000 were
called in sick.
No, they're ghost workers.
Right.
They just were getting checks because the corrupt operation. And the same thing, I think, has been going on in Afghanistan. When they say there's 300,000 people in the armed forces, yeah, there are 300,000 checks going out.
Right.
But the number of people actually fighting maybe is 50,000 or 60 or 100 or whatever. And so we'll talk about this in more depth in the First Amendment Forum, but we're at a place here where the largest amount of money that each of us spends every year, when you really think about it, is on government. It's in the taxes, the income taxes you pay, the property taxes, the sales taxes, all the different taxes that are embedded in the first order of what you actually pay. And then when you start thinking about when you buy, a can of Coca-Cola is paying tax.
Oh, right.
And all these other, the elements that go into the Coca-Cola, they all pay tax. So when you start thinking about how much tax is collected,
how could they be broke?
Well, beyond that, we should be saying we deserve better than this. This is not a situation where we're spending $2 billion a year on government, and of course you shouldn't expect to have sidewalks and hospitals and schools. And we're spending trillions, perhaps close to 10 trillion a year now, all in, given all these extra programs that we're coming up with, maybe more than 10 trillion a year. For that, you should get more than a doofus making decisions while he's looking at his watch, thinking about how quickly he can get back to having ice cream and watching the washer dryer spin around.
He was talking about that, how he went to that dignity, presentation with dignity. Well, he didn't mention that he was looking at his watch and totally undignified, but that speech was absolutely. We're going to dig into that on the First Amendment Forum because I did watch it, and I'm sure we have points in common and then differing points, but. The thing I think that we're ready to discuss, Charles, because, when you and I first met, there's certain presumptions, I think, that anybody makes about somebody that they meet who's talking on an alternative, independent news broadcast type of thing that, this person must know about this and must think like this and whatever. And one of the things that I brought up pretty early on in our interactions was 9/11. And you've always, this is what you do, and I respect it. You don't like to get involved in conversations about things that you're not an expert in. And you will listen very carefully to what people have to say about any topic, but you will remain really silent if it's something that you don't know about, which is a stark contrast to most people who want to pipe in and make it seem like they know something about everything. Right. But I really do think now, as we were approaching the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I mean, this is for you to decide, but I think now is a time, not just for you, but for so many Americans to revisit everything that we've been told about 9/11. And the only question that I have, I got into a bit of an argument with my brother the other night over this. He said something about Joe Biden's speech with being, the reason we were in Afghanistan was because we were attacked on 9/11. And I just said, please point to one element of evidence that links Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, Afghanistan, and what happened here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. And he got angry. But there is no piece of evidence that can be cited. And during the First Amendment Forum, Charles, I want to, if we have time, I hope we'll have an opportunity to do this. I want to talk to you about some of the unexplained evidence that just flies in the face of the official story that we've been told. So I think actually, we've got to make the transition now because it just takes a minute. And so in less than 5 minutes, people will be able to watch that discussion. It will be the First Amendment Forum on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. DJ in the comments is saying he or she still does not buy it that RDS is dead. And it is weird that his lawyer wouldn't confirm it and that this is the longest period in the 3+ years I've been being sued by Robert David Steele, where I've sent a communication to his lawyer and there's been no response. There's never been a 4-day lapse. Right. And that is conspicuous.
Watch the Dead Parrot sketch.
Yeah, it's just resting.
No, he's not.
But we'll talk about RDS. We'll talk about Joe Biden's going to be the focus. But I also want to talk a bit about 9/11. And maybe you and I will do a special for 9/11. But people should become sponsors. It's the first of the month. If you're a sponsor on Patreon and have missed the messages, no longer honoring $2 monthly sponsorships on Patreon due to increased costs in dealing with Patreon and bringing videos there. But you could still get a budget subscription, $2 per month on subscribestar.com. I'm doing my best, Charles, to keep it as economical as possible for people to watch with us. But please do not ask me to post these videos on free platforms because all we're doing is bolstering those platforms until the day that they decide to cancel me. So if you like the show and you want it to keep going, please become a sponsor and join us on Subscribe.